5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Okay, everybody, here we are. This is Truth, Beer, and Podsequences. Thank you for joining us. Hopefully you listened to our intro episode and you're ready to go on this weekly podcast journey with Julia and I. So you are?
I am Julia, and you are?
I am Marco. So here's what it is. So as we said in the intro episode, and you don't need to go back and re-listen to it because I'm going to let you know that this is Truth, Beer, and Podsequences, where we recap Cincinnati craft beer podcasts with our version of the truth. Okay, Julia has her version. I have my version. Sometimes our versions are the same version. Sometimes they're different versions. We have our version of the truth. We hope that there aren't too many consequences for you or I from the hosts or the participants in the other podcasts for our version of this truth. Hopefully a fun listen. We cover the shows that we listen to, that we care about in the Cincinnati craft beer industry. That's what this is. That's what we're doing. Julia, did I miss anything about what we're doing here with the show?
Only thing that I would think to add is, while this is a recap show, we strongly encourage and want you to listen to these podcasts on their own. Don't just take our word for what we say happened on those podcasts. Ever. So, Marco, where are we recording today?
Well,
Who
Julia,
can we thank for this amazing space and for these amazing beers that are sitting in front of us.
Yeah, so we are at the lovely, beautiful, and just fresh-smelling BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery.
So today's show is not sponsored by Higher Gravity,
Oh,
the bottle shop that does beer event calendars.
that's right.
That's all I got.
And that doesn't host this podcast, right? So they're not sponsoring in any way,
No.
actually. Did you buy your beer event calendar?
I absolutely did. I actually, they did an early release, kind of a Christmas in July sort of thing that ran from the 25th through the 31st.
Uh-huh.
It was supposed to go live at noon. I brought up their website at, I think, 11:20, and it was live, so I bought it early.
Ooh, you had early VIP access. Well, you should, because you do the, the Facebook posts about the Higher Gravity beer calendars.
I do.
I mean, you're practically employed there.
It has actually been suggested that I work there. Some people thought that I did for a while because of all the posts
That was actually
that I was
on
making.
a podcast. People said, I think she works at Higher Gravity.
And then the next time I was in there and talking to Jason, one of the owners, he's like, yeah, you don't work here, so get out of the back room. So, opportunity missed.
Terrible. Yes, thank you again for being here at Truth, Beer, and Podsequences. This would not be a craft beer podcast without having beer.
Absolutely.
So, Julia, why don't you tell everybody what you're drinking?
On this 80-some degree day, I am drinking from Untitled Art their Espresso Honey Imperial Milk Stout. A nice heavy 12%er, perfect for these balmy summer evenings. Marco, what's in your glass?
I have a Rebel Yell. The Rebel Yell is a pale ale from Grainworks, and it's an American pale ale. So, yeah, if you haven't had it, you can come to BC's Bottle Lodge and help them blow the keg, because I'm sure whatever's on deck after this, they'd like to get to that.
So, Marco, what podcasts are we going to be covering today?
All of them.
Every single one of them?
Every single one.
Awesome. So a quick, for those of you who don't know all of the podcasts, and these really are not all of the podcasts. There
Really?
are so many out there that we don't know about.
Correct.
But we're covering kind of the big ones that are out there. So in today's episode, we're going to be going over Cincy Brewcast, where the Gnarly Gnome covered Brews in the Burbs, as well as his YouTube show Prost, where he drinks spring smoothie. We're going to talk about Sonder Stories and Bella. We're going to go over Matt Damaris's Outcast Podcast, where they went to Alematic Artisan Ales. And I suppose we can't leave out Shift Beers, where they drank beer styles that they hate.
And burped a lot.
But
we'll save that for later. Julia, what are you thinking? Do you want to spin the wheel and decide what we're going to land on? Go ahead and we brought a wheel. It's a giant wheel, and we have it here, and we're going to spin it. Actually, we should probably get somebody that's drinking here at BC's Bottle Lodge to spin the wheel.
What about our producer, Kenny? Maybe he could spin the
Yeah,
wheel.
producer Kenny.
Okay.
Hold on, let's go get Kenny. I don't know why he was so upset about that. I mean, I don't know why he felt like we were bothering him, but he came over and he did the thing, and he's like, okay, guys, I got to go back over here. But anyway, so Kenny spun the wheel, and Julia, tell the folks what Kenny landed on.
It landed on Sonder Stories. So we'll be talking about this week's Sonder Stories, where they go over their new fruited sour Bella.
Yeah, so on Sonder Stories, that's chapter 67, Julia, if you didn't know that. Bella Chase joins Justin and Danny on the podcast to talk about a seasonal favorite at Sonder, Bella Sour Ale with raspberries. Chase dives into the unique process of this beer and how it compares to its sister beer, Mella. The gang also talks about dream vacations and what beers they're drinking on those trips. And then you can check out the Sonder Stories playlist on Spotify.
So one thing that I kept thinking while listening to this podcast, so they've had Mella, which is absolutely delicious. They've had Adela, which is absolutely delicious.
Okay, yep.
Now they have Bella,
Yep.
which I haven't had yet, but I am sure that it is absolutely delicious. What do you think is next? Yella? Hella? Fella? Smella?
Well, Smella sounds like it's a great name for a beer, a sour beer at that. Oh my God, we get some of that Smella.
I mean, they could do something with mangoes. That would be more of a yellow-looking beer for Yella.
Yella, yeah.
For Hella, passion fruit, maybe.
Yeah. What other letter? What if it started with an X? Xella.
Zella?
It would be Zella.
That'd be Zella. Yeah.
Zella.
Yeah, Zellaphone. They could do a Zellaphone.
A Zellaphone.
So one of the things that I
A
found to
Vuvuzela.
be
Do you remember the Vuvuzelas?
the Vuvuzelas.
Do you remember those?
Yes,
It is
those
Olympic
were-
season right now. Was that the Olympics or was that his
World Cup? That
World
was
Cup? That was World Cup.
Yes.
Sorry, I apologize to the soccer
Aficionados
like
listening.
you. So the beer, Chase goes into it, talks about it, and it sounds like it's a blend of three different situations, and I call them situations, but there's beer, and then there's fruit, and then there's I don't know. It's just
Fooders.
act like I know what I'm talking about. So
You're only a brewer.
I know, but to call me a brewer is generous. Except I brew beer, so maybe it's not generous, maybe it's accurate. But yes, Chase loves working with raspberries. Okay.
Although I was shocked to hear him ask, why haven't they gotten any blue raspberries in for him to make a blue raspberry beer with?
Yeah, I mean,
The
you
awkward
think he knows
silence.
somebody. You think he knows somebody that has some pull, some weight to bring in the blue raspberries.
Marco, much like I'm sure your parents hated to tell you about Santa Claus, I hate to have to tell you, but
Don't tell me.
blue raspberries aren't a thing.
Get out of here.
They're not real.
Stop it.
I can't. I've got to be truthful.
It's bullshit.
This is the truth. Blue raspberries
That's bullshit.
do not exist. So it was terrible when Chase brought that up because again he loves brewing with raspberries. They said on the show that every time they talk about anything fruited, the first words are raspberries,
Yeah.
raspberries.
Yeah, raspberries,
And
raspberries.
just the defeat in his voice when they said, "Well, we can't get blue raspberries because they're not real." My heart broke for him.
Well, what they did to sort of cheer him up and placate him is they gave him a carrot, and he ate it from the outside so that the core was left, and then he could eat the core. So, I mean, it all ended up okay. And then they moved on to talk about, serious topics. And these are very, very serious topics. There's a lot of things going on in the world. Simone Biles pulled out of the team competitions and then went into individual competitions after she took a lot of heat. And there's just a lot of talk about many, many different things. Diversity with some of the athletes over at the Olympics, with their chosen lifestyle and with mental illness. So Sonder Stories wanted to dig in and go very serious into a very serious topic. And so they posed the question, if money was no object, where would you want to spend your vacation for 2 weeks? It's extremely pertinent conversation. It's an important conversation. I'm glad they're having it. And so they did a lot of Europe. There was a lot of Europe in there.
Europe, yep.
There was a lot of Europe. There's Sweden. There wasn't there? Sweden. Sweden. There was some. Was it Morocco?
And Danny once chased to backpack him through the Alaskan wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, like carry him on his back. Carry his backpack.
He would be like that thing. What was it? Master Blaster in the Road Warrior movie that had Tina Turner in it, and then Mel Gibson, of course.
Sounds right.
And then they had this guy on a little guy on a big guy back, and that's what they wanted to do in Alaska. And what I found interesting also is that as much of these would be dream vacations, many of the participants on the show had actually been to some of these countries.
So how are they dream vacations?
Well, because they would
already been there.
Well, because they would go to higher lengths. They would go to beyond just. They would be very lavish. There would be very lavish bathrobes and just wearing bathrobes. There would be, hanging out on a beach.
Having someone feed them grapes at a vineyard.
Exactly. You remember when they were talking about the grapes, and I like the purple ones, I don't like the green ones, or I like the green ones, I don't like the purple ones, and it's like they have seeds and they don't have seeds, and Chase was the one who was real picky about the seeds. Well, he likes the seeds because he's such a conservationist that he takes the seeds and he plants the seeds.
And with those grapes come some of the beers that you may or may not be drinking from Sonder.
That's correct. Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, it was as always a great episode from Sonder.
And then they had the country segment.
Mm-hmm. The country segment called "What Are You Listening To?"
Yeah, what are you listening to? And if you're not listening to country, you're wrong. Mm-hmm. That's the segment they do always at the end of the show. It's they intro with the country. What are you listening to?
Which is a very long intro.
It's a very long intro. It's a very long intro. It's like Inagata Devita. And then they go into what they're listening to, and everybody's listening to country. And when they have guests on and they're not listening to country, they'll let them know that they're wrong, that they should be listening to country.
Mostly Kenny Chesney. Although I will say I did pick up on, did you pick up on Danny's new nickname during this episode, or this particular segment's What Are You Listening To? No,
I must have missed it.
Danny TikTok Harold, because all he does is watch his TikTok anymore.
Danny TikTok Harold, that's right. No, that's right. That's where he finds his new music. Mm-hmm. Like many people, they talk to their friends, they
listen to the radio,
or let these services, these streaming services, suggest music for them.
Not Danny.
Not Danny. What he does is he goes on and he's influenced by Instagram on what he's going to listen to.
Mm-hmm. Which, hey, I mean, I guess whatever works for you.
So they ended on like a relative of Willie Nelson, like Willie Nelson's, brother-in-law's son, who, also excels at like karate, and then they played that song because it was on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So.
Or the TikToks.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Oh, TikTok. That's what it was. TikTok.
It's all the same.
TikTok. So that's pretty much a recap. But did we tie it up with a bow?
I mean,
from start to finish.
That one. Absolutely.
It was enjoyable.
It was.
It was enjoyable, and it got me thinking about if money wasn't an option, where would you go on vacation? Did you think about that at all, Julia, or did you?
Galapagos Islands. It has been on my bucket list for a very, very long time.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Huh.
Yep. No question. How about you?
Well, I didn't think about it.
Oh well.
I did say that I started to think about it, and then I got distracted. It was something else.
Your batteries ran out.
Yeah. Kenny forgot to change my batteries. So
what's next?
Yeah, what is next? We should have someone spin the wheel. We should have someone from BC's come up and spin the wheel of podcasts.
Let's do it.
Let's go get somebody.
All right. And we're back, and the wheel has been spun.
All right. They did it, and they were happy about it. They thought there was a prize, so we went up and asked Kenny. I was like, hey, you got any prizes or anything? And he's like, well, I got some stickers from 16 Lots over here. Like, perfect. Just give them to me. Let me give them to the lady, and, she's excited. She's excited. We talked about Sonder Stories. Let's talk about the Outcast Brews Traveler Outcast Podcast. That's what she landed on. And so let's see, let's get to the Brews Travelers Outcast Podcast. They are at Alematic Artisan Ales in Huber Heights, Ohio, which is Dayton area.
A little north of Dayton.
A little north of Dayton. So the Cincy Brews Travelers Quick Trip and Wrong Way Twitty meet at Alematic. So those are people, by the way. Quick Trip and Wrong Way Twitty meet at Alematic along with the Brews Traveler at Alematic Artisan Ales. And they're joined by owner and taproom manager Greg Carson to talk about the story of Alematic. So that was a pretty short intro to the story. That is true. That's what they talked about. But it was a very interesting podcast. And it was an interesting podcast on several levels, right? So Alematic is a place where if you want to go past beer, just the beer in your glass, there are layers to their story and there are layers to the business that go and intersect to the beer. So what did you find, Julia, that stood out to you? What is your version of this podcast?
The first thing that stood out to me was the incredibly long discussion they had about is Lil Nas X's cowboy song, whatever that song is that I can't think of the name of off the top of my head. Is that hip hop or is that country? They kind of started with a very strong one there. But then they got into the what sounded like absolutely fantastic beers that they were drinking.
Are you a hip hop person?
I listened to some, yeah.
What was the last hip hop joint you listened to?
See, that's where I get a little murky, as where the line is drawn between. I know it's not necessarily rap, but like hip hop, R&B, that type of thing. But Lil Nas X's most recent song has been a bop for me for the last week or two.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not my thing. I respect that they put the time into discussing it. It's an important conversation. I'm glad they're having it. The first thing that I think they cover, at least they mention, they don't cover it until they get to the point where they're discussing the foundation or the start of the brewery until they get to the owner. And the first thing they do is they talk about where Alematic is. They talk about the name Alematic and how it sort of, riffs off of a hip hop album name that I don't know. I didn't grow up. I'm not familiar with, but he mentions it over and over again in the podcast. And it's
a very hip hop inspired brewery.
Yes.
From the artwork, the graffiti on the walls to the names of the beers. I believe that instead of a tap list, it's called their set list.
Set list. There's a turntable at the end of the bar that has
everything has a focus of that had Princess Purple Rain.
Yep, Princess Purple Rain.
Classic. Can't go wrong there.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good conversation that they had about some really delicious sounding beers and then even deeper conversation that they had about how if you have kind of a minority-owned business, depending on the area, does it encourage minorities to come in and drink more craft beer? Like, is that kind of a shift in the clientele? Is that a shift in craft beer being exposed to more people because of the location, the name, the styles that you have, which I thought was a fantastic conversation.
Right. And were they the first minority-owned brewery in Dayton?
I meant to look that up and I didn't. I want to say they are, but I don't know that for sure.
I don't know if they're the first or the only, but it comes up in the podcast. I encourage you to listen to the podcast. It's a good listen. But there is, I think the biggest thing that comes out of the podcast as far as the highlights is it's a cool space. It has a music, not just hip hop, but also music theme throughout the brewery. And it is minority owned, and all of the beers on Untapped were rated not just solid, but pretty high for solid.
Absolutely.
And I think they made the comment that all the beers on the set list were rated a 4 or higher on Untapped. Now, you can decide how much weight you want to put into that. That's up to you. You put a lot of weight into it. You don't put very much weight into it. That's up to you. But the rating is very high, very solid from that perspective. So you would think that what you're drinking, you have confidence that you're going to enjoy it at least, right?
Yeah. And they try to have close to 20 taps up all the time. Good variety of everything from the super light beers to the super dark beers. And it's only about an hour and a half outside of Cincinnati. So go up and check out Elmatic and listen to Outcast Podcast. Hear what those guys are bringing to the table for sure.
Yeah, and the Cincy Brews Traveler is Matt Damaris, who also does Hustle and Brews. So definitely check that out if you want to check that out.
We'll be going over Hustle and Brews probably the next episode that
hopefully so. I mean, he released an episode 2 weeks ago, so that was something that when we were in our planning and preparation stage for Truth Beer and Podsequences, we did cover and discuss when we were talking about it at that time. When the next show pops up, we'll talk about the next show. Matt Damaris, that show, just to give you a little bit of insight, Matt Damaris is an entrepreneur who doesn't think he's an entrepreneur. He likes to think of himself as a hustler, baby. And so he gets entrepreneurs on the show and discuss their story.
While drinking craft beer.
While drinking craft beer. So that's how that circles back into our sphere of Truth Beer and Podsequences. So did I leave anything out that you wanted to talk about, Julia, about the Outcast podcast this week with the Elmatic?
Only other thing is if you're new to the Outcast Podcast, every episode there may be a rotating cast of who they're traveling with, who they're going to the different breweries with. So you may not hear the same voice 2 weeks in a row, but it's definitely a great listen. And subscribe, sign up.
Yeah, definitely. You're absolutely right, Julia, because many of the episodes, Matt's wife comes along and is on the show as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So I think for what we're doing here, for our purpose, I think we covered on what we wanted to cover for the Outcast podcast. So that means it's time for somebody else to spin the wheel.
And we're back. We were able to talk a small child that wandered into BC's seemingly by himself to spin the wheel, which was kind of odd. He could barely reach the bottom of it.
But we had to wait till after you ordered a shandy. He got himself a shandy. Oh, yeah. From 50 West. It's a 3.8% shandy. And that's fine.
So they spun the wheel, and it landed on Prost, which is the Gnarly Gnomes. It's not a podcast; it is a YouTube show.
Right.
But because of everything that the Gnome does for the Cincinnati craft beer community scene, for everything, we definitely wanted to include it in our weekly rotation. This week, he drank Moozy by Brink, which is their award-winning milk stout.
And if you haven't had it, what have you been doing? I mean, other than me, I've never had it because I'm just afraid of milk sugars if it has milk sugars in it. But it is award-winning. It is very, as he says, delicious. I have heard that about the beer. I fully expect that the beer is absolutely everything. It's
as someone who's had the beer, I've had Moozy many times. It's a great milk stout. It's not too sweet. It's not that overly sugared, marshmallows and all kinds of extra sugar chucked into it. So you do get that nice roasty, malty stout quality, but then the milk sugars just give it that sweet edge to where it's a perfect beer no matter what time of year it is.
That's
Summer,
great.
Fall.
And you can get it now year-round in distribution.
Absolutely,
I mean, they have some on the shelf here at BC's Bottle Lodge, Montgomery, and you can get it at Kroger. Brink is distributed through Adina Distributing. So a local startup business teaming up with another local startup business to further their businesses. That's a great story. He had Moozy in, wasn't it his glass?
It was his glassware.
Yeah, so it was the Gnarly Gnomes glassware. And in order to get the Gnarly Gnomes glassware, I think right now you have to know the gnome. I don't think it's on his on his merch page yet. Mm-hmm. So I'm getting 2 glasses, 1 for each fist. And so speaking of the gnome, yes, he has a merchandise page on his website. Go and listen to and watch his things. If you like what he does, please support him. And that is true for every podcast that we listen to. We talk about Sonder Stories. Go out to Sonder, buy the beer, have fun, partake in the things that happen over there. Matt Damaris, he not only has podcasts, he's also a realtor locally, and he has a give back aspect to where he has collects money to give back to veterans. Mm-hmm. And so not only does he buy veterans pints of beer, but he also supports another local business that makes boxes for flags.
The flag holders, yeah.
Yeah, the flag holders. Yeah. So, there's a charitable aspect to that as well. So if you have the opportunity or of that mind, please support those in their efforts, right?
Absolutely.
So that was Prost. Did you want to go over anything else with Prost?
No, Prost is a pretty quick and easy show to watch. It's just him, having a drink. Sometimes he knows what he's going to be pulling out of the fridge. Sometimes it's kind of a surprise, and he lets you know what he thinks. He's done everything from local beers to national beers to non-alcoholic beers. So Prost kind of covers everything. He's done some cocktails on the show before,
yep.
some liquor. So
yeah, I remember
it is
that.
Definitely something to where you don't have to be 100%, 100% beer fanatic. But just watch him and pretend you're having a drink with him in his basement.
Yeah. And it's a quick show, like you said. It's a YouTube show, and Fretboard TV is a YouTube show. So whenever that episode or whenever they do another one of those, we'll talk about those too. And if you're a brewery that decides you're going to, or a podcast where you're going to do that, hey, let us know, and we'll put you in the rotation.
So while we're talking about the gnome, did you want to go ahead and discuss Cincy Brewcast?
Yes.
All right.
Absolutely. So we don't need to spin the wheel. We're going to move right on sort of the same umbrella of... They're under the same umbrella, right?
It's done by the same guy.
Same guy. So let's see.
Cincy Brewcast is his full-length podcast. You can find it everywhere that podcasts are, and it is focused on Cincinnati craft beer. Sometimes he does talk a little bit about some things happening nationally. Sometimes he discusses seltzers, even though we all know that seltzers are not top on anyone's list. He covers it all. Anything that is happening local in Cincinnati, in the brewing industry in general, he covers. And this week he was recording at the Brews in the Burbs Beer Fest up at Sonder.
Yeah, and I would read the intro or the show description,
but it's long.
It's a little bit long. So let me put this in a little shorter package than the show description here for you. It's a beer festival in Mason, so it's north of Cincinnati. BC's Bottle Lodge. So the owners of BC's Bottle Lodge, both Liberty and Montgomery, they started a few years ago. They wanted to put on a craft beer festival in the suburbs, and they wanted to source great beer, and they also wanted to have a give back aspect to it. They wanted to have a charity aspect to it. And this year the charity is, as Julia looks it up for me, so she's going to tell us about the charity here in just a moment, but
it's the Lakota Optimist Club that helps
after school activities and things of that nature. So very worthy cause. And so the team, it was at Sonder Brewing, and it did not take up taproom space. Sonder Brewing has an enormous outdoor yard space. So
they have a full acre or two, I believe, don't they?
I believe it. I mean, it's a very big outdoor space. So this event happened outside. So there were actually, if you wanted to go and have a pint at Sonder, you could park in Sonder's parking lot, and you can go in and enjoy Sonder like you would normally enjoy Sonder. If you were attending Brews in the Burbs, you would park at a parking lot down the street. It was a very short walk less than 5 minutes to the actual Brews in the Burbs event. And the Brews in the Burbs event had over 30 breweries represented. They had, I think it was 2 food trucks or 3 food trucks. There was live music. So this was a beer festival is what it was. And it was great to see because I was there. I volunteered. Typically, in my role at the place I don't work at, I go to these events and I'm a representative for the brand that I brew, but with not distributing and just the way things are right now, my beer was not going to be present, which is fine. But I still wanted to be part of the event because I like the crew at BC's. I like supporting what they do, and I wanted to find a way to make my time, which I had, useful. And so I volunteered at the event, not knowing what my purpose or my role was going to be, and I wound up being the beer pourer, the volunteer beer pourer for the VIP tent.
Excellent. So were you able to interact with the gnome at all while he was doing his podcast, or did they have you pretty nailed down to just pouring beer for the VIPs?
So I was just pouring beer for the VIPs, and the gnome was recording his podcast on the opposite side. I could actually pour beer and see the gnome recording his podcast on the opposite side of the beer festival. Also, Tony Lang was there from
Chef Tony,
Queen City Mobile Food
Queen City Food Truck Association.
Queen City Food Truck Association. So the podcast happened. I volunteered at the festival, and so in the podcast they go into the founding or starting of Brews in the Burbs. I think it was 3 years ago, and then the charitable aspect. They have somebody on that is on the board, and we know a board member.
We do.
Danny Harold.
Danny TikTok Harold.
Danny TikTok Harold is a board member, and so they go into those details, right? The founding of it, the charitable aspect, the putting on of the beer. They give Brian, who is an occasional producer for this show, Brian Brownlow here, and he puts the B in BC's. Brian is the curator of the craft beer, and they give him absolutely much due accolades for his procurement of
really the best of the best beers. It's not just the flagship beers of a brewery that you always see and you can always get.
Yes.
But the tap list was special beers. I mean, beers that I don't believe any of them were brewed specifically for this event, but they were, we want you to bring your best, your beers that people may not see all the time.
Yep, that's exactly right. And to that point, they talk about in the podcast where there was one brewery that was the only keg of that particular beer in the state of Ohio.
That's fantastic.
So, yeah, that's pretty neat. And with these events, there's always a general admission and then there's a VIP, right? So, just to let you know, there's usually a very good reason to upgrade your admission, right? To these beer festivals, we don't need to get into the big ones that happen like downtown and what the VIP thing is, but let me tell you, it's worth it for that. But for Brews in the Burbs, it's worth it as well.
Because they get to have you pour their beer for them.
Right. Yeah. Everyone felt so honored, and I could not have felt more honored. But as an example, you had a tent. So you were in the shade. You could go into a tent. You were in the shade. There were tables. You could sit down. Now, everybody that was general admission, you either needed to have brought your own lawn chair, bag chair, whatever.
Which who thinks to do that for a beer festival?
I have no idea. I would have never thought of it.
But apparently on the podcast, a bunch of people had. No mention.
And a bunch of people had their dogs, too. Did you hear dogs barking the whole freaking podcast?
Yes. No, next time you record, please leave your dog at home.
Yeah, I mean, what is this? I mean, Cincy Dogcast? Oh, my God. You said...
So for those of you who aren't watching,
Podcast.
P-A-W-D.
Oh, my God.
You guys couldn't see it unless you were watching the live stream. But Marco, instead of face palming, he mic palmed incredibly hard at my terrible attempt at a pun.
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
so
This is what you have to look forward to every episode, guys.
That was great and terrible at the same time. It was wonderful. So the dog was on the show. They had special guest dog on the show. And the VIP tent also, every hour, a new keg was tapped. So there was one bin with ice that had a 6-barrel of beer in it. And every hour, on the hour, we would keg a new keg of something different.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and
that is. I don't know that I've ever heard of a beer fest doing that. Like you hear beer fest having special beers that you can only get at
right.
beer fest, but not every hour on the hour.
But this is for VIPs.
VIPs have something special.
And then they had some snacks. So there were like M&Ms and peanuts. So you had a little something to munch on while in between food truck food or whatever. So it was pretty cool.
Definitely
it was
an event worth giving your money to,
absolutely,
or volunteering for, depending on what you'd like to do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a blast. I had a blast, and it was a good event. They pulled off a really, really good event. I hope they're able to present a very nice check to the charity, and I look forward to next year in whatever form that takes on, and hopefully I'll see all of you there.
Yeah. Now we didn't go over a ton of the podcast specifically for this one because I don't know, we feel like talking about the event itself and the good that it does overshadowed the podcast a bit, and we don't think the gnome minds.
No, of course, the majority of the show was talking about exactly what we just talked about, right?
It's true.
How the event came together, the charitable aspect involved, and then putting on an event.
And Danny TikTok Harold running beers back to the gnomes so that they had something to drink, and they're from the beer fridge segment.
Yes. Yeah, he was running. Like he
I wish I could have seen that.
He was running. And then, of course, they have Brian Brownlow on the show to talk about that. They do go into a little bit of the beer industry and some of the things that have changed since BC's Bottle Lodge opened to today. And they talk about some of the ways that BC's Bottle Lodge themselves have changed from when they opened to today. So all of those things are in the show, worth a listen, and it's people that are in Cincinnati that are talking about the things they're passionate about, and that's why another thing that's common in the thread of everything that we're listening to, and hopefully you pick that up about what we're doing as well.
Well, looks like we have one podcast to go.
All right, Julia. So that means we need. We don't need a volunteer. We don't need to spin the. We don't need to spin the wheel because it's the last one. Let's see.
I don't think I wrote down anymore. Did you write down a podcast?
Hold on a second. So we have show dry erase cards that have bullet points, stick tos. Hold on a second. I'm going to read mine. Do you want to give a shout out to our host while I'm taking a moment?
Yeah, let's shout out again our host at BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery. Kenny puts the K in BC's. He's been doing an excellent job producing this podcast, except for things where he forgets to hit record or forgets to change the batteries. He spins the wheel. He spun the wheel marvelously.
He did a great job. He's like
really did.
He's like the Vanna White of. Wait a minute.
Beer.
He's like the Pat Sajak of spinning wheels.
Sure, we'll go with that.
Okay.
In our world, in our version of the truth.
Yeah.
It is. So did you find anything else we need to talk about?
No, I think we're done, Julia. Let's have a cheers and cut the show. We're done.
Hey, let's have a shift beer.
All right, we'll have a shift beer. Julia.
Marco.
I think we forgot something. So we ended the show. We're gonna have a shift beer. We had a cheers.
Long days at work. Yeah.
We had a cheers. Packed everything up.
And then it came to us. Like hit us over the head like a ton of bricks. We forgot about shift beers.
Yeah, totally forgot. That's too bad. Well, I mean, we're here now, so we can pick back up. So, to our listening podcast family, because we're family now at this point, right? I mean, everyone who listens to the show,
They've stuck around this long, they're family.
Well, I mean, you got, who's going to listen to you? You got me, my mom. I could probably send it to my grandma,
She won't know
who's
how to
incarcerated.
listen to it, but
It's not, I mean, it's so much more than that, Julia. I mean, there's ducks, there's bounce checks to the wrong people. There's, I mean, I can't even get into the rest of it.
well, let's give your grandma a rest from us talking about all the things that led up
There's a lot of things.
There are a lot of things that led up to her being where she is, you being where you are.
Yeah.
And let's talk about shift beers.
Yeah, let's talk about shift beers. Okay,
it's a
so
great one to end our first show on.
howdy doodly, everybody. This is Shift Beers coming at you. Julia, what's the show about?
This week's show is about beer styles that they don't like. They put in their show note descriptions that it sounds like a bad show. Aren't they all? But they all bought a beer in a style that they did not like. And as they drank them, it just cemented the fact that, yep, they did not like certain styles of beers.
They shit on a Pilsner to start the show.
I don't know how they can do that.
They shit.
Gnome is
They
going
totally
to-
crapped on, and by the way, the wrong guy's Pilsner to shit on.
Oh, no kidding. And he listens to the show.
Danny Trejo.
Danny
Trejo.
He's going to be coming after him.
Well,
There may not be a shift beers for much longer.
if they have caller ID, they know where to go.
Yeah. So they started off the show with drinking Danny Trejo's cerveza,
Sí.
his
Sí.
beer.
Muy bien.
And then normally they say doing things like calling the breweries for the end of the show when they're, pretty baked. But instead they called this particular brewery at the beginning of the show because they found out that the beer they were drinking was canned back in like February or March, so it was old. It was older than it should have been.
So, yeah, I mean, it was old. I'm not going to lie. I want to try it. I want to try it.
They have plenty left at Country Fresh.
I don't get out to Country Fresh.
Well, then you can't have any beer.
I wonder if they have it over at Jingle Jams.
Or what about BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery?
I haven't seen it.
Probably because it's shit beer.
I mean, maybe.
Could be.
Could be. I want to try it, though. I ain't going to lie. I'm going to bring it on the show.
All right. I still want to try to find some of that Steve Austin's Broken Skull.
I've had that.
IPA. Yep,
No,
how's that?
I have had that, and they had that here.
But they don't have it here now, so it doesn't help me.
So I have had that, and they did have it here. I don't know if it was 2020 or 2019, but when it came out, I did have it. Broken Skull IPA out of something Segunda, California, possibly.
El Segunda.
El
or whatever.
Segunda,
Yeah.
California, maybe. But I have had that, and if we find it, I'll grab it. You
We'll
should
drink
grab
it on
it.
the
We'll
show.
drink
Heck
it on
yeah.
the show. Absolutely. Danny Trejo, though, I have really admired the career of Danny Trejo, somebody who has taken himself and decided that he wanted to, go on a path to not continue to be in prison. And much like my my grandmother, she's not out yet, but that's what she's decided, and she has one of
She's
those.
going to turn her life around.
She has one of those tattoos like Danny Trejo has on his stomach. She has one of those because of how much she idolizes his story, his journey. And so he's a good guy from what it seems. From what it seems.
I do like the fact that while he may have shit beer, I do like how if he ever plays kind of a villain, a bad guy in a movie, he has it written in his contract that bad guy always has to die so that he doesn't propagate this idea in kids that violence is cool, violence gets you somewhere, being a bad guy, has perks. Because it doesn't. So, yeah. Danny Trejo Cerveza.
Yeah,
Not
Danny
good.
Trejo Cerveza.
Still want to try? Give it your own.
No, I do want to
We've
try it,
definitely tried,
and
yeah.
we're gonna try it.
definitely try
And if when I find it, I'm gonna pour you some, and you're gonna
Okay,
have to
okay.
decide. We will decide for ourselves. I trust the palates of the Shift Beer crew.
There's one palate of that crew that I do not trust.
Because it's fake.
It is 100% falsified.
Because it's a fictitious It's a fictitious person. It's like Monty Teo's girlfriend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't know who we're talking about, Brian.
Right. The fictitious Brian, and we have the BC's Brian. He puts the B in BC's. So, Brian.
Yes. Tell
Fake.
us about the story of Brian.
Okay. So, when you dream up this brewer, distiller, cider maker, seltzer maker, you scour the country. You scour the world. You want the best of the best.
Everything.
You want the best of the best. You go to Germany. You go to Cologne. You hit up places like, I don't know,
Arizona.
Yeah. I mean, go to Arizona. Go to California. You hit up California. You go to Belgium. You go to all these places, and then you end up with, you know what? We can probably find a guy that's in the Cincinnati State Brewing Program. Or you just make up that he's in the Cincinnati State Brewing Program and then have him come on board, or, you find the people and then you create this fictitious figurehead. Kind of like the before everybody knew that there was a man behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz. Like, you
had to have the floating head.
Yeah, the floating head. Brian, in air quotes, only the people on the live stream can see my air quotes, but this Brian is the...
he's the scapegoat of the podcast.
Wizard of Oz.
He is the one that... so a lot of times they'll bring bonus beers for the end of their shows. He is the one that never brings bonus beers but always drinks everyone else's.
Because he's not real.
Right.
He can't purchase any beers. At some point, they ought to just, put that into the show and incorporate the fact that, hey, this fictitious person should have participated in bringing the beers. But instead, they continue to make him the heel so he doesn't bring bonus beers.
But I do give them credit on keeping that narrative, on ensuring that every episode, I mean, and it varies. Some episodes, the fictitious Brian plays a bigger part where they have, him in more of a speaking role to where he is discussing things or screaming unintelligible noise into the microphones. But most of the episodes, he's just not there. And so they have like a quick excuse about, he's canning or he's brewing or, he just isn't available for one reason or another.
Right.
But they actually decided that for styles we don't like, Brian was going to be a bigger part of that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of makes sense.
Yeah. Well, what we're talking about is their podcast evolving over, from episode 1 to now. Are they on episode 40?
43.
43, coming up on the 50. And what they're doing is they're putting their collective talents together. So you get a social media director, you have a person who manages multiple tap rooms, and then you have the wonderful whiz kid at graphic designer. And to call her a kid is disrespectful. I apologize. A whiz, a maven in the industry of graphicus, and so they have plenty of ability to create this character. And this character also does not drink very much when they're not on the show, and then drinks very little in small samples when they're on the show. Mm-hmm. However, they've been able to interject this character and create touch points, these wonderful, loud audio touch points where it can keep coming up over and over and over and over again, right? I mean, there's, bringing butt luging into the forefront of, typical craft beer culture, things of that nature. And so it's wonderful to see how they mix this masterful brew that they put together, this gumbo of things that they're doing over there at Shift Beers. It's wonderful producing, actually.
Yes, it really is. And to kind of go a separate tube back, for those of you who have not listened to Shift Beers before, You absolutely need to. It is, out of all of the beer podcasts that we listen to, it is the most fun. And that's not to take away anything from any of the other podcasts.
Not at all.
But this is a show where they basically get together after work to have a shift beer, to have a drink after work, and just talk.
Right. So many of the shows that we listen to, and when I say many, all of them except this one, they have a very clear path. Like this show is about this. This is what we're doing. The show is about this. Is what we're doing. And you get from A to Z. You know, this is where and in the middle,
you have fun while you're listening.
In the middle, we have beers. We have fun.
Sure.
But even though Shift Beers has a category, they say this is today's episode. It's more like a
free form.
Like a free form. It's less like a straight and narrow and more like a scavenger hunt or more of a
snow globe where they take their general idea for the show, which is the snow. So in this instance, beer styles they don't like.
Right.
And they just toss it in the air.
Correct.
And just let it all filter down. And
yeah.
it is an
they
absolute
They just
blast
let
to
it all
listen to.
filter down and come down and then there's snow and then there's particulate in the air.
There was snow when I was on Shift Beers. And ice.
Wow.
That's
right.
fun.
No. That's true. You were on an episode where
during the blizzard of
it was
2001.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We'll
Okay.
talk a little bit more about the show, and I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to put together the burp count. This is very important. Now, I'm going to go into a little bit of a thing.
Okay.
Right?
Do your thing.
Hold on. Okay, everybody. We don't have any imaging or music or any of this. Marco's going to do a thing. Okay, so...
That was a spectacular thing, by the way.
Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna
Do you
log
want
that.
cut?
I'm gonna log that because me doing spectacular things is few and far between. So my wife says. Anyway, so what I want everyone to understand is that all of the shows, the Cincinnati craft beer shows, are great. You drink beer, right? Mm-hmm. If there's one that you want to enjoy and imbibe and make into a game, Shift Beers is one. Now, you can come at it from a couple of different aspects, right? You can come at it from chug a beer when they do a SpongeBob rejoin. You could do have a drink when they hit a button, which is where they have a recorded voice pop up that reinforces or enforces the particular category or thing that they're doing right now.
You could do something where you have a drink every time Chris's early onset dementia pops in and he forgets what has just happened in the previous 5 seconds.
Correct, yes. Or you could do what Truth Beer and Podsequences is calling the burp count. You could drink with the burp count. Okay, so every time you hear an audible burp on Shift Beers, you got to take a drink. So here's what we're doing. We're estimating, and we did a lot of research on this.
A lot of math.
A lot of research, a lot of math. Every time someone takes a general swig, a sip, a swig, a mini gulp. Hold on, let me do one as an example. It's about 2 ounces right there. I put down about 2 ounces on there. So, Julia, over the past few episodes, a few episodes ago, they hit an all-time low. This was the bourbon episode. Hit an all-time low. Very low.
Yeah.
Then they started ramping back up, and they ramped back up. Last week, they were at 40 burps, which is still low for the Shift Beers pod. Okay? This week, they really, really brought it. They brought it. And so we're talking about 68 burps. And at 2 ounces a burp.
That's a lot of beer.
All right, we're going to give you the exact amount here in just a second on Truth Beer and Podsequences. So if you have, and this is the thing, so if you're going to participate in this game, right, you need to prep. You need to be ready. You need to get yourself in the zone. Are you doing this by yourself? Are you FaceTiming friends? Do you have the Hangout app? Are you connecting with people? Are you calling your grandmother in prison via FaceTime or something? And then so you're listening to the episode. You got your alcohol in front of you. You're like, I don't care whether you're doing your easy drinking, Vlad
Danny
Pilsners,
Trejo's
Danny Trejo's. I mean, cerveza, or you're going all the way. You're going to do some Moozy. Maybe you're going to do some Moozy, or you maybe hit it in between with a little Grateful Spinner, which is an American IPA at 7.1% from Fretboard Brewing and Blue Ash. Shout out to Fretboard Brewing.
And shout out to Blue Ash. They should rename themselves Brew Ash.
Absolutely. We could start a thing.
Let's start a thing.
Once we get
After this show, let's start it.
After the show, we can get a thing started. So with that many burps, how much alcohol are you consuming?
That is over 130 ounces, which equals to roughly 8.5 16-ounce glasses of beer.
Give them a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Tell you what, Shift Beer is bringing the burps. And then as far as a drinking game's concerned, my God, I mean, this is what we're doing. You take how long? I mean, I don't want to go exactly into how long the show was, but let's call it roughly an hour. You get almost 9 beers up in you in an hour.
They could be the lightest beers possible. You're going to be hurting.
That's good.
That's good.
That's good. That's some good. That's some good work right there by Shift Beer. So, they don't really put or list the beers that they're drinking on the show. Julia, do you have any recollection other than drinking the Trejo-ness?
No, I remember some of the styles. Milkshake IPA. Oh, no, I do remember one. Beth does not like black IPAs. And the only one that she was able to find was Damocles, which is a black milkshake IPA by Brink.
Yeah.
And that was another where we tried it again, and nope, don't like it. But there was an ESB, extra special or extra strong bitter. There was I believe Josh doesn't care for triples, Belgian triples.
Yeah, or tripels.
Tripels,
as they
even
call
though
it.
The one that he brought is like the most award-winning, most famous tripel.
Yeah,
out
it's
there.
it's
So
the gold
choice.
standard, and he's like, it's like not my thing.
No. But yeah, they did some drinking. They did not like some beers, and
they didn't like almost anything they brought.
No, which really hit this episode on point. I
Yeah.
mean, it was styles that they don't like, and they pretty much confirmed, nope, do not like.
And it overflowed to bonus beers, though.
It really did.
Which is odd, right? So, if any of you were ever invited to be on Shift Beers, congratulations. But also, the bonus beers are supposed to be the things that are. So the way I hear it is they all get together, they have a Shift Beer, they start a show, they do their theme, and after they do their theme, they have a couple of beers to just say, hey, we're hanging out, having a couple of beers. We're not having to play to the theme. And the Shift Beers, they all hated them.
Every one of them.
They hated them.
The entire show was full of fails, which was a success.
Absolutely.
As far as the show itself.
An absolute success.
Yeah.
Absolute success. And the other thing is they also failed, as in like the black IPA.
Mm-hmm.
Well, all you could find is a black milkshake IPA. Now, first of all, if I'd have asked you 2015, hey, do you have a black milkshake IPA?
You'd be looked at like you had 3 heads.
Yeah. I mean, what the hell is that? What are you talking about?
Who does that? Why would you do that?
Yeah. And honestly, if you said in 2015, do you have a black IPA? Only a few breweries would say yes.
Or they would say no, but we have a Cascadian Dark Ale.
Get out of here with that. I am... This Button Brian and I sometimes are kind of
One and the same.
Seeing eye to eye here, Cascadian Dark Ale. How about you? I'm gonna stick my foot in your Cascadian ass.
Damn.
Cascadian
Just
dark
because
ale.
I know more than the brewer at
Are
the
you
table.
Are you from Cascadia? I mean, is this bothering you?
A little bit, maybe. I feel slightly attacked right now.
My family's from Cascadia. Get out of here, Cascadian dark ale. It's your pretentious ass self. I don't believe this bullshit. I totally get champagnes from a certain region of France. I totally get that, you can't call something a lambic because of this, that, and whatever. I understand the origin of things, but Pilsner came from Pilsen.
What are you talking about? Let's go back to shift beers.
Okay. All right, never mind.
But anyway, shift beer, I mean, it's one of those shows where you feel like you're sitting around drinking with friends, having a good time while you're listening to it. I laugh more listening to that
and
show.
It was great. It was a fun episode, and I don't know why, but they brought Pop Rocks. I mean, they started the show like, hey, let's have a shift beer, and hey, let's have some Pop Rocks.
Well,
and they're
but then
just
you
like,
have Chris, being Chris, wanting to snort them. I did this in grade school. You wonder why he has early onset dementia.
yeah, he's like,
Between that and the Fago and the Juggalo meetups.
doing a line. I've never seen anyone get a line of Pop Rocks.
Quite like Chris does.
Well, I haven't seen Chris do this, but audibly on the show.
You don't watch the live stream? You're not signed up for that level of Patreon?
So when I listen to the show, I have a video conference that happens like as soon as I have a time of day when I listen to the show. As soon as the show ends, I have a video conference for one of the jobs that I actually get paid for, and so no, I don't watch the live stream, but yeah, to set up Pop Rocks and to crush them down so you can just give them a nice, that's not my thing, but apparently on shift beers you can do that.
On shift beers, anything goes.
Anything goes. Did we leave anything out, Julia, on the Shift Beers podcast? I mean, we talked about their
shift beer, which was the Danny Trejo's Cerveza.
Yeah, and Danny Trejo's coming for them.
Coming for them, yes. Chris specifically, but no, Josh. Because
no, it's going to be Josh.
Yeah.
It's going to be Josh.
We talked about how the goal of the show was to bring beer styles that they don't like, and they succeeded overwhelmingly.
Mm-hmm.
And their bonus beer they also didn't like, which also, again, fit with the theme of the show. So I think they did great.
Yeah, it was a great episode. I had a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
As it always is.
Yeah.
So yeah, give them a listen. Follow them at Shift Beers on all the different social medias.
Also, something fun to do is, I know all of you listening to this, you have shift beers. You do. Whether you wouldn't be listening to this if you didn't have an interest in craft beer. And a shift beer is a beer at the end of your workday, whether you're in the brewing industry or not. It's just typically called that in the brewing industry. But whether you're a housekeeper, accountant, whether you own a
multi-million-dollar business, or all you do all day is record podcasts,
you have a shift beer. At the point where you say, I am disconnecting from my work and I am going to start to take relaxing time for me, once you crack that is your shift beer.
So share those on social media with the hashtag Shift Beers, and the Shift Beers guys and gal will possibly retweet, reshare on Instagram, all that kind of good stuff.
I'm asking you to do that with Truth Beer Pod as well. Go ahead and include Truth Beer Pod on Twitter, and we wanna know what you're drinking. And if it's fun, if it's cool, we're going to interact with you. We're going to comment on it. And maybe you're drinking something that we want to drink. Maybe you're drinking something that we want to have on the show. That would be fun. And so I encourage you to please share those. It's pretty cool to get into a community of people who really like the same stuff, and what we're in the community of, and hopefully we are embraced is, I'm not even talking about the podcast. I'm talking about, hey, we all like this thing. Cincinnati craft beer. Let's all talk about it. Let's all share about it. Let's all get our friends into it.
Let's enjoy it together.
Let's enjoy it together. Julia?
Marco.
I think we did it.
I think we did it.
Yeah.
Episode 1 in the books.
Yeah. Julia?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. No, I was cutting you off. Do it.
I definitely have to shout out to our producer and host, BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery. We would
Kenny.
not be here without them.
Kenny, BC. Shout out to our producer, Kenny. Shout out to BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery. Come on down to BC's Bottle Lodge Montgomery, where
a kid can be a kid.
A kid can be a kid.
Or order a shandy.
Right?
But we also want to give a very, very, very special and a huge shout out and thank you to some of the people that people and groups that made this possible, that got us starting. So the Gnarly Gnome for helping with our music, for mentoring us on what we need to do to get this podcast up and off the ground.
Yep.
To everyone at Shift Beers who both encouraged us, they were excited for this idea, and for kind of prodding us with a cattle prod saying, when is the episode coming out? We need this. Thank you for holding our asses to the fire and for pushing us to make this happen. We would not be here without you guys, and we appreciate you more than you'll ever know.
Absolutely. And we're going to continue to support and thank and enjoy everything that they do. And I certainly thank everybody that's listening. I encourage everyone that's listening to, if you like it, please share it with your friends. Let's spread the podcast. Julia, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for coming along this journey, agreeing to do this journey. And I want to thank anyone in your life that's allowing you to do this or helping you and supporting you to do this, because I truly appreciate the people in my life that are believing in this and helping me do this and supporting me in doing this. Because honestly, when we get down to it, it's just the two of us having fun, talking about the stuff that we enjoy. Mm-hmm. And to this point, this is purely a passion project. And maybe that will evolve as time goes. But I have to say, this is fun. And I like doing this. And I hope everyone out there enjoys it. And if you don't, hang in there with us for a few more episodes. And let's see if we can grow together with this thing. So Truth Beer Pod, it was fun.
It was very fun.
Let's do this again next week, Julia.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are you doing next week?
Listening to podcasts and talking about them in the most truthful way possible.
That's right. Truth Beer Pod, out.